Hi, my name is Don, and today we're going to talk about der Wörter. These der Wörter are usually referred to 6 particular words in general. We have dieser, meaning like this, that, those, or these. Jeder, each or every. Alle, all. Manche, meaning some. Solche, meaning such. And welche, which is a question word meaning which. Now, a few things that are important to know about these. One, dieser can be used with both singular or plural nouns. I can say this book, but I can also say these books. And you would use that, you would use dieser for either of those meanings. Now, jeder, on the other hand, each, really only works with singular nouns. I can say each book that I have, right? But I can't say each books that I have. So it's the same basic rule in English and German. I can really only use it for singular nouns. Now, as we move down the list to alle, manche, and solche, these get used with plural. So I would say, for example, all books, but I don't say all book. I would say some books, but I don't say some book. So again, they only work with plural nouns. So again, jeder, singular nouns only. Dieser, singular or plural. Alle, manche, solche, plural nouns only, and welche could be either or. I could say which movie or which movies do you like. Same again as you would in English. Now, before I get moving on, and I'm going to talk a little bit how we form these, if you've just started learning German, you've probably only been introduced to either the nominative, which is the subject of your sentence, that case, or the accusative case, which is the direct object. If you're a little bit further along in German and you're using this video as a review, feel free to see everything that I'm about to talk about. For those that, again, have maybe just started and you're only through nominative and accusative, please just focus on when I mentioned the nominative and accusative items and just skip past the dative stuff. I don't want you to confuse yourself by trying to learn something that you haven't come across yet. So again, please skip that part. So, first, let's start off with der Wörter. Why are they called der Wörter? Well, mostly because they function like der, die, or das. Now, these I know you've already been introduced to. These are what's called the definite article, meaning the. Now, in English, it's nice. We just have the, right? We don't have to worry about gender, but in German, we do. There's masculine, feminine, and neutral gendered items in German, and each one of those has its own the, which is why we have der, die, or das. Der for masculine, die for feminine, das for neutral. There's also die, don't forget, that's not gendered, but die for plural as well, okay? And the way these get formed then is they follow the exact same patterns as der, die, or das. So if you already know what happens to der, die, or das as you change it from nominative to accusative, and again, if you're further along, dative, then you actually already know how to form these words in the correct way. So let's take a look at some of my examples. The first example is in the nominative. Okay, this is the subject, when it's the subject of your sentence. So we have der Mann, for example. Now, if you remember from what you've learned already about articles, masculine, when it's in the subject case, the nominative case, it doesn't change anything. It's just der, right? And that's the exact same, as a matter of fact, with the feminine. Nothing changes. It's die Frau. Nothing happens. Same thing with neutral. It's das Buch. Nothing else happens to it. So how would you form these then using, for example, this or these? Well, let's take a look. And you can see right after the arrows, I have the transformation. I go from der Mann, masculine, to dieser Mann. Notice what I highlighted in the PowerPoint, the ER ending. That masculine ending, the ER, gets transferred directly over to the dieser, right? The ER there. You can see it's the exact same ending. Why? Because it's matching gender. So let's take a look at die Frau, which is feminine. It becomes diese Frau. And notice again, I highlighted the endings for you. Feminine always has this E ending, and so take a look at what we do to diese. It just gets an E ending. So we have diese Frau, meaning this woman. How about for book? Das Buch. Notice it has an S ending in there, so what did I do to make it these or this book? You got an S ending. Dieses Buch. Okay? So you can see the grammatical gender transfers from der, die, or das directly onto the ending of dies. Okay? And here's the interesting thing about that. It's the nice thing, I should say, is it works the same way. It does not matter if you're using diese, jeder, welche, solche, manche. Those 6 words that I had in the previous slide, they all function the exact same way. You take the base part of that word, and then you just match the gender of the noun you're talking about right at the end of it. So for example, Now we have the accusative case. Now, most of you have just recently learned this. And what's the only change that we go through when we're talking about the accusative? It's that the masculine, the der, the er ending, becomes an en ending for Dane, right? And we're going to see that that transfers over in these der words as well, okay? And again, feminine, if you remember die, or neutral, das, or plural, die, it doesn't have any change at all, actually, in the accusative. So you don't even need to worry about those. If you know what you're talking about as the accusative case or the direct object, you don't even need to worry about changing the pattern at all. It's only for the masculine you have to look out for. So here's our same examples. Der in accusative becomes Dane. It gets that en ending. So you would say Daneman, for example. Now look what I did to say this man. I made it diesen Mann. Notice what I highlighted in the PowerPoint. That en ending transfers right over to the D's. So it becomes diesen. Okay? And what did I just say a few seconds ago? Feminine doesn't change, die. Neutral, das doesn't change. So there's nothing to worry about here actually in these changes. So we have die Frau. If I want to say this woman, it's diese Frau. If I want to say this book, das Buch becomes dieses Buch. It gets the same ending because, again, nothing changes in the accusative for that. And again, this works with any of them. If I want to say every man, I would say jeden Mann if it was in the accusative. If I wanted to say which woman, I just do the e ending, welche woman. Yeah, welche Frau, excuse me. There's a bit of English that is squeezed in there. So welche Frau, for example. If I wanted to say every book that I have, right? Jedes Buch. Okay, jedes Buch. Again, that es ending just transfers over. So it's the same pattern again, no matter what it is that you choose. Now, for those of you that are a little bit further along, and again, if you haven't covered this next topic, please just skip ahead to the next part in the video. But for those that have done dative already, just remember your patterns that change. What does masculine become when it's in dative? It goes to dame. It gets an em ending. So dame Mann, if you wanted to say this man in dative, it would be diesem Mann. That em ending just transfers right over. And we go right on down the list. What does feminine become in the dative? It becomes der. So you would say not die Frau, but der Frau. And again, we transfer that er ending, because it's now dative, right onto the end of this. So diese Frau. Again, what does neutral, das, become? It becomes dame. It also gets an em ending, and that ending transfers over to the der Wort. So dem Buch oder diesem Buch. Okay? So what does this mean for us? Essentially, if you know how these definite articles work, the der, die, or das, and how they change with all the cases, then you know exactly how to form any of these der Wörter. All you really have to do is follow the pattern that we did on the previous slides, and you can substitute dies, where I had in the slide examples, with any of those other words, jed, and then just add the ending, or welch, or solch, or manch, right? And then you just do the appropriate ending depending on the case. As I mentioned, dieser Mann, or jeder Mann, for example, or welcher Mann. I'm just adding that er ending to all of them. So that's how every single one of those work. So for example, if you look at the bottom of my slide again, I mentioned here der Mann or jeder Mann, or if it's accusative, den Mann is jeden Mann, and you just follow that pattern all the way across. So lastly, just remember that alle, solche, and manche only work with plural nouns, just like they would in English. Okay, so for example, I can't say some book, I have to say some books, right? And how would we say that in German, for example? Here's one of our plurals. Remember, plural has an E ending, just like feminine, so it would be manche Bücher. Okay? And that's the only example we didn't have on the previous slides. So I hope that kind of caps how these der Wörter work. They're actually, again, fairly simple once you figure out what that pattern is. Again, if you know der, die, or das and how that changes depending on what part of the sentence it is, it's the exact same changing patterns for any one of those 6 words. If you have any questions, please let your instructor know. Thank you.